prior to the term test, they learned a lot about equity. And when we learned about equity, we called preferred shares and common shares shares.
Yep.
Then we had the term test, and now we're in complex financial instruments. So we got the, it's complex. Sometimes we smush things together, and the CPA way question ended up having the answer where it was called preferred shares, but it had so many characteristics that substance over form, it was debt. And some people saw it because it's pre-work and the videos, and then other people were like, yeah, okay, I get it, and I get substance over form, but like they had in their mind debt bad, equity good. So wouldn't a company always want to make it equity? So I don't know about you, Nikki, but what do you hear when you hear the term always in accounting?
Oh, I think there's no always, or very rarely is there an always. It's always dependent on who your user and what your situation. So a fair warning, Sam did give me a heads up about this question. So I've had a few minutes to think about it, but not much, which is fine. But I am going to talk about with my family's business. So I grew up in a small business, and my family decided, because it's a funeral home, and so even though myself and I have two brothers, another one which is a CPA, we had no interest in becoming funeral directors. So my dad and my mom and dad wanted to sell the shares, but they wanted, because they're from a small community, they wanted to make sure the community was well served when they stopped after 40 years of owning the funeral home. So how did they do this? They decided they had two amazing employees, and they decided that they would sell to the employees. And so how they did that is through a share structure. So whereby my parents had the preferred shares, and then these two employees were able to purchase the common shares. So in this case, the shares were structured for estate planning as well. So we know that is in this particular case, it's classified as a liability. And I was also talking with my husband, who is a banker, because I said to him, like, what happens when you see inevitably preferred shares that are classified as a liability? Just wanting to know, what sort of that other take, thinking about a whole host of users here. So first of all, let's come back from the perspective of my family. They didn't need any outside financing. So for them, frankly, they didn't care. Is it classified as an equity? Is it classified as a liability? They said, you just do what we have to do. It didn't matter. So then that made me think, okay, what is the perspective for a company, when it is classified as a liability? How does that impact from a banking perspective? So I asked my husband, and he said often what they will do is they will just get a postponement of debt. And so that is just an agreement where the shareholder says, we're not going to redeem these shares for this particular period of time, so that the impact on the leverage, the debt to equity covenant, is not something that is so significant.
Nice. And that actually ties in really well. Thank you for giving that holistic perspective. No, it's fantastic, because students have often asked, well, can they do that? Or what about this as far as how any agreement is written? And it's like, yeah, this is a legal contract. People get clever. Like, how do you think derivatives kind of came to be? Is people got really, really clever of how they wanted to make things sound. And we as accountants are like, hey, how are we going to capture this and reflect the economic reality of the situation on these financial statements? So I love that deferment, that postponement of debt, so that you get that alleviation from the debt to equity ratio. That's fabulous. The other reason, so there's all these like pro-con lists, and I kind of think back to like our CPASB, like debt is not always good in the sense that, or pardon me, equity is not always good because it can be seen as diluting,
Absolutely.
And then debt is cheap. Debt is tax deductible. Tax doesn't call you at night and ask how its shares are doing. Debt wants to get paid back. It doesn't want growth. It wants you to do like good enough to like pay them the interest and then give them their money back. So I don't know, little pros and cons. Yeah, never say never and never say always.
Never say always. Absolutely. Yes. And it depends on who your user is, right? Like that's a fundamental PEP kind of, I would not methodology, but a way of thinking is approaching. You can't lump every user into the same bucket, because looking at a bank versus looking at my parents, looking at a public company, like those are all different users. They all have a different take on the financial statements and those impacts. So it's really coming down to like, how do you view this debt versus equity?
Yeah.